All right. Will I fire ahead then, Sir Ravi? Yeah. Okay. Hi everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm Bobby Healy. I'm the CEO and founder of Manna Drone Delivery. That's our aircraft behind me there. I'm a programmer. Number one, that's my trade, and I've been building technology businesses for 30 years now, a long time, buying, building, creating, and selling software businesses mainly. And most recently, in the last 3 years, I've been building Manna and Manna Drone Delivery, and it's got a very simple business model. It's a delivery system that happens to use miniature aircraft, one of which you see behind me. My team design and build these aircraft ourselves in between the UK and Ireland, where I'm based. The business, as I said, is 3 years old, and we've been doing very well. We've raised venture capital. Investors from venture capital organizations have invested in the business, just over $30 million so far. And we have a very, very simple system. It's a highly reliable aircraft that will carry parcels, small parcels of up to 3 kilograms, about 10 kilometers round trip. And I'll just quickly show you. And we're live now delivering in a town in Ireland with about 10,000 people in that town. And if you look at this picture here, that's the town. It's a suburban town. I hope you can all see that okay. Each one of those orange lines is a drone delivery. If I hover over one there, you'll see that's Brasco Coffee Academy. That's a coffee shop. Over here, that's a Thai restaurant, more Thai restaurant. Up here, more coffee. And you can see that if I go, for example, hover over one, this one down below, it's a Mexican restaurant, and that flight is just about 7 kilometers long and round trip. And that flight takes about 3 minutes from start to finish. So if I look in the center here is a building, Tesco. Tesco is the largest supermarket retailer in Ireland and the UK. And we fly from the roof of that Tesco store. And we have all of our vendors there. And then if I zoom in a little bit, you get an idea of the flight paths and kind of, the usage level we have. So you can see here, these are standard, suburban kind of communities. And as said, we fly directly into the front lawns and sometimes the back gardens of these houses. The aircraft is fully autonomous. So once we load the cargo in it, in the center, from the roof, once we load the cargo, we simply stand back and the aircraft does everything else. It flies to its destination. It scans the destination using a combination of LiDAR and sonar and radar, should I say, to make sure it's safe and it's got a flat delivery location. And that's how it works. So I'm going to also show you a video. Let me just pull this up here. In this video, when it plays, I'll explain it before it plays. I'll keep quiet while it's playing. But essentially, you're going to see the aircraft arriving into a community. It's carrying food, prepared meals for 3 people, 2 parents and a little girl. And you'll hear the little girl shouting as the aircraft arrives. It's a very exciting thing to happen, in a community like this. But you see the aircraft arriving, it flies at about 50 meters altitude. When it arrives over the house, you'll see it pauses there for a while. That's when it's scanning the area for safety. And then once it's safe, it will descend to about 15 meters and it'll hover there. And then the doors will open up and it'll release the cargo. It'll release the cargo using a tether, which you'll also see. You'll see the bag coming out and you'll see it the whole way down to the ground. So the video is about 1.5 minutes. I'll keep quiet now while it plays. Can you hear that okay? Can everyone hear that? Yep.
Dinner is here. Dinner is served. Whoa! This is the alien. can smell it. I can smell it. I can smell it. It's so good. Can you actually smell it? Dad, are you getting this? Look at it. Look at it.
So that's what the process looks like. We've already, in this town of 10,000 people, it's about 3,000 houses. We've reached already just over 30% of those homes use the service regularly, and within that 30%, about 80, just over 80% use the service more than 4 times. So it's quite popular. It's easy for people to adopt, and our mission essentially is, over the coming several years, is to make this service ubiquitous across suburban towns around the world, everywhere. It's a highly regulated industry, so we're essentially regulated by the aviation regulators in each market that we operate in. And the aviation regulators treat us like an airline. In one hand, they measure us, they monitor us, they audit us like an airline. So we have all of the safety roles, responsibilities, documentation, quality assurance processes that would be involved in running a small airline. And then we also have, for our aircraft, a certification process for the aircraft, where again the aviation regulator will assess the aircraft from a safety point of view. And our aircraft has it's not like a typical drone that you might be able to buy in a shop. It's got a ton of safety features on it, reliability features, that means it can never fall out of the sky. So it's a very difficult piece of engineering. It's not too difficult to build a drone, but it's very difficult to make a drone that can fly 10 million times safely. So that's kind of this, that's roughly the space that we're in. We're 75 people in the company, I should have added. And we're right now live only in Ireland, in that one town. And our plans are, next stage, go to a slightly bigger town in Ireland of about 40,000 people, get that live, and then once we're happy with the quality and the scalability of the system, we'll scale that everywhere. We already have a European-wide license, I should say. So what we're doing there, in theory, we could do anywhere we want in Europe, but we're not ready for that scale yet. So, and the title, what I was asked to speak about, and I'd encourage your questions as well, because I tend to just speak quite quickly and very broadly about things, and invite all your questions, technical, commercial, whatever you want to ask me. So for COVID, so we were ready to do our first live trial last March, March the 17th, no, March the 18th it was, because that's when we were due to go live in a university in Ireland. We were going to be delivering to the students in the university, 30,000 students, delivering them food in a pretty constrained environment. Literally the day we were supposed to go live, Ireland announced a lockdown, COVID obviously related lockdown. And so it wasn't appropriate to continue the trial. There was a lot of uncertainty around how people should behave and act during COVID. Nobody knew quite what the right thing to do was, and we felt it wasn't the right thing to continue a project that would involve people collecting around the central area and handling things that other people touch and all that. So we postponed that project. And then we started to have a conversation with the health service executive in Ireland. And the health service executive, it's called the HSE in Ireland. It's equivalent to the NHS in the UK, or it's the public health service. And we said, well, let's make an opportunity out of this, and let's use the cover of lockdown to fly in a populated area. So if you think about what we do, there's a lot of testing involved, a lot of confidence involved in being allowed to fly in a populated area over people. And so this was, frankly, an opportunity to find a town that's affected by lockdown where there's not going to be a lot of people outdoors. And so it's a lot safer to fly in that populated area. So we got an agreement from the HSE, or at least a promise of support from the HSE that they thought it was a good idea, we should do it. And moreover, we integrated with their e-health system to do an end-to-end concept trial in a small town of about 1,000 people in rural Ireland. And so the way that looks is, the town is called Moneygall in Ireland. And that's, town just less than 1,000 people. There's 700 towns like that in Ireland. So rural Ireland, small town, very limited facilities, and certainly towns too small to be able to afford a delivery system. So while during lockdown, we were asking cocooning, people like elderly people, vulnerable people. On one hand, the government was asking these people to cocoon, stay in their homes to stay safe, but at the same time, not providing a way for them to get their medicine or their critical food supplies. So we went to the town with the blessing of the HSE, and we rolled out a pharmacy delivery program into the town. It was hugely successful. We got worldwide news coverage from it, but essentially what it is to the people living in the town was they were able to meet their doctor through a video call, the secure video link, and they were able to have a conversation or consultation with their doctor. If appropriate, the doctor was then able to issue a prescription for medicine to that person, and they would issue the prescription electronically through the system directly to the pharmacy. And then the pharmacy would prepare the prescription, and we would fly directly from the pharmacy to the person's house. So you had an end-to-end digital patient consultation coupled with prescription and delivery of the medicine directly to people's homes. And it was all, we didn't require a smartphone or internet access, any of that for the customers. They were actually able to phone us or phone the doctor to start the process off. And they could either do by phone or they could do it through video consultation. So that there was no, we got people from 75, even with one customer, 85 years old to use the service. We had to be able to make the service work for people of all technological abilities and connectivity, which we were able to do. So it's a very, very interesting and highly unusual implementation of what's really a very technically complex platform, but integrating with customers that have no technical credentials or ability or all of those things that you might usually need for such a complex system. And so we were initially rolling out prescription medicine, and then we moved on to groceries. So we were delivering all of the critical groceries, so bread, tea. In Ireland, tea is the big one. All the staples, milk, meat, all the staples. So this community, which actually more than 50% of them were over the age of 60, quite an old community, were suddenly the #1 connected community in the world, and they had everything they needed through the drone delivery system. We did it for free, and it was to learn as much for us to learn as it was for anybody else, much of us to learn as was for, to do a great service for the customers. I'm going to show you actually.
I just had a question actually, like how do they request the drones? Is there an app to do that, or they just call the company and they request it? And how does the onboarding of the goods and offboarding of the goods actually happen?
Yeah. So good question. So that's they have two ways to request it, but this is back then, right? We've changed now; it's purely digital smartphone. But back then, we allowed them to call us, and they could call us by phone, and we did a leaflet drop to the houses. They could call us by phone, and they could order anything that they wanted, and we then just collected it in the supermarket, which we flew from, and we sent it to them, and it was all done for free. And that was again to learn. So that was one way. The younger people in the town obviously used their phones, and they were able to, open an app on their phone and order standard shopping basket style system, and they then could pay, and from their address, their home address, the system knows where that house is, and we use GPS to find the roof of the house, and then computer vision to find our way there. That's just while I'm on this subject, that's the town there. So it's a much smaller town, as you can see. All of those orange lines are our flight paths, and again, it's a much smaller town. So that's 4.5 kilometers distance, the furthest one out. We fly here, or we flew here from the center, and you can see then pretty much the whole town used the service. It was hugely popular. And then how do we load it? Back then, and still now, it's the same system. We get the cargo, we put it into a standard bag, and it's a very standard paper bag. There's nothing unusual about it. The only thing is we have on the handle, it's a rope handle instead of a paper handle, so it needs to be strong, because if we're carrying 2+ kilos, and when we drop that out of the aircraft initially, there's some force, so you need to support a force of about 4 or 5 kilos. So therefore you need a strong handle on it. But that's the only thing. So we get that bag, we put it inside the aircraft, we open the front of the aircraft, we slide out a cartridge, which is a big box from inside the aircraft. We put the product in there. That cartridge is also the battery. So when we change the cargo, we also change the battery at the same time. And each flight uses a new freshly charged battery. That allows us to run many flights in quick succession. So, for example, one drone can do between 8 and 10, or between 7 and 10 deliveries per hour, depending on the range. And it does that because we change the battery each time. So the cargo loading process is very simple and very quick. It's literally the aircraft's on the ground. You take out the cassette, you put in the new cassette with the cargo in it, and that's it. You close the door and you stand back. The system is fully autonomous. So it takes about 30 seconds from when the aircraft lands to when it takes off again. So it's very efficient to turn around. And then the delivery, you saw the delivery there. It's pretty straightforward. We lower it down to the ground. We use LiDAR, so we can deliver coffee without spilling it. We often deliver fresh eggs without cracking them. We can deliver anything. It's very, very delicate delivery process. Even in very high winds, it's a perfect delivery system. So that town, Moneygall, was really, it was a very...
And how about the weather? Like weather conditions, wouldn't that affect the delivery? And
yeah,
how it
it kind of, it does and it doesn't. It doesn't affect whether the delivery works or not. But what will happen is the bag will swing a little bit in the wind, and that's, for most things, that's okay. We've not had a problem with it yet. So I'm going to show you a delivery in strong winds. Let's have a look. I think you'll see the bag moving in this one. So if I show you this video, I'll just forward wind a bit. Okay, so the aircraft's coming down now. You'll see the bag moving when it... You saw the way the bag swings. We call that the pendulum effect for obvious reasons. And so that was in very high winds. That was in 35 km/h winds. the aircraft very stable, not affected by it, but the bag swings. So that's why we require 2 meters wide diameter circle to deliver into, and we can be accurate within that 2 meters. We have a new system that actually the aircraft moves to counteract the pendulum effect. So we use computer vision to look at the bag. When we see the bag is moving, we can move the aircraft to move the bag back. And we may or may not implement that. It's technically very achievable to do that, but we don't like that experience of the aircraft moving a lot to counteract the wind. It doesn't feel very safe. It is very safe, but it's quite dramatic to see it. So if the aircraft is moved, and particularly, it's a constant wind is fine, right? That's easy, but that's not the way wind behaves. And usually if there's a large tree or a forest of trees, what you'll see on the other side of that is swirling vortexes of wind that are very, very disruptive. And so for us to fix that pendulum effect on the bag, the aircraft will be moving quite a lot. So we can do it, but we may choose not to. And I think you saw that was, a pretty good example of where the pendulum effect happens, but it doesn't affect the quality of the delivery.
And you said that you were able to deliver coffee as well like that. So how would that work?
Very simple. It's surprising, and actually more than half of our deliveries are coffee. People love getting coffee delivery, and if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense because everyone drinks coffee every day, or in some countries they do, some they don't, but certainly in Ireland they do. But coffee is not really something that you can deliver practically, right? Because it just takes too long, it's too slow. But when we can get to your home in less than 3 minutes, our median flight time in that town is just under 3 minutes. It means that the coffee, when it arrives, is very, very hot. And so it's simple. We put it in, those little cardboard trays that sometimes if you buy 3 or 4 coffees, you get a little cardboard tray. So we just put it into one of those trays, put it inside the bag, and that's it. It's the same cup, it's the same lid, nothing. There's no unusual packaging for it at all. And the only unusual thing is if you see that aircraft behind me, you see the way it's tilted up. So that's because when we fly forward, we tilt forward, the aircraft tilts forward, the props tilt forward to generate forward motion, which means the fuselage stays parallel to the ground. So for that stage of the journey, the coffee is parallel to the ground. When we arrive, the trick is when we arrive to slow down, we do a negative angle bank to slow down, but that's fine because centrifugal force doesn't spill the coffee. And it's literally that simple. So the foam is intact, we don't spill a drop. Even the little design on top of the foam is still intact when we deliver it. And most importantly, it's very hot, so we have customers that have 40, even 50 deliveries already of coffee that they just order it every single, week, or even sometimes twice a week. And it's completely normal. It's completely normal. And our customers are ordering everything. And we obviously have takeaway food, coffee. We also have books, a bookshop. We have a hardware store. We have really everything you could possibly need in the community. Over 15,000 different products you can get by drone and receive it in less than 5 minutes.
So how does it, in terms of, would you charge the customer for the delivery or do you charge the businesses?
Well, so that's a good question. So both. We don't know actually what our final view of this will be like. We're still very much testing and learning. And so right now we have 2 models where we charge the business the delivery fee, like one cost per delivery. And on the other, for some businesses, we do that like supermarket and an aggregator delivery. And we have special Coca-Cola stores, for example, or Ben and Jerry stores. So that's a B2B business where we charge those businesses. And then in others, in the small restaurants, so small family-owned restaurants in the town, we simply charge the consumer a delivery fee. And the consumer is very happy to pay that. It means you don't have to pay a tip when you get a drone delivery, right? So it's actually cheaper to get a drone delivery than to use a road-based delivery. And it's greener. Obviously, I forgot to mention this, but it's important. Drone delivery is green, right? We produce no CO2. It's quieter than using the road. You can't, at cruise altitude, you can't hear the drone. I know it sounds loud in the video, but That's just the way the microphone that's recording it. Really, when we're at cruise altitude, you can't hear us. And more importantly, when we're at delivery altitude, you can't hear it indoors. So it's green, it's quiet, it's safe. It's safer than using a person to deliver. It's more secure, more private. There's no stranger showing up at your door with your food or your coffee, whatever. It's also more scalable because, you know, we can fly in rain and wind on weekdays, weekends, when gig economy workers, you know, that might work for Deliveroo or Uber Eats or one of those guys. It's just not viable to have enough people to do that kind of service. So it's safer. There's no more cyclists or motorbikes, you know, racing around the roads to get products delivered quickly. It ticks all the boxes, really. It's just far better than using the road.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. It's just that I thought that initially that when you fly a drone, there are so many restrictions to fly a drone around, and it's so difficult to get the accesses and permissions to fly drones around that. I think this is very inspiring to know that it's happening and there's so much scope for this in terms of ease of access, and also during this time when lockdown was happening, when people were actually not able to access
Yeah,
stores.
for sure. You know, the permissions are really difficult to get. You know, it's this is one of the most difficult businesses you could possibly build, and it's not because of the technology per se. It's more that it's, well, first of all, it's hardware, and hardware is difficult to, you know, because always an iterative process to build hardware. You don't just design it and build it and it works. You design it, build it, and then fix it and keep going. So you iterate. But we're still, the hardware that you're building flies, right? So it's such a delicate, to make a flying object is very delicate and specialist piece of design that brings in different types of engineering that are very unusual. And then on top of all of that, and this is the big one, you're flying over people, and those people didn't ask you to fly over them. These aren't people that said, okay, I'm ready, fly over me. These are people that are just living in the town that we work in, their children, their families, they're just minding their own business, living their lives, and we're flying over them. And so it's a really, you need to be very thoughtful and um, what I would say conservative, hyper conservative about the rate of progress that you make, how quickly you want to go, you know, how many things you want to do, how ambitious you are, has to be tempered with the fact that you're flying over uninvolved people that whether or not they like it or whether they don't like it, you have no business taking risk that they didn't ask to be involved in, right? So that makes it incredibly difficult to move forward and to do more things. And that's why regulation is very important. So it would be highly illegal to do what we're doing now without the right license. So if you want to build a drone delivery company, you can buy a drone easy. You can do a little bit of engineering on it to attach some cargo. That's not difficult, and a lot of people have done that, and there's lots of videos all over the internet doing that, and they're fun. But it's irresponsible, it's dangerous, it's going to result in injury or death, and you're going to end up in jail, you know. So we're, you know, it's good and it's bad that we're heavily regulated. It's good that it means that we have a third party external, you know, vetting or auditing that says that we're safe. It's not just us that thinks that we're safe, it's somebody else as well. In aviation regulator thinks we're safe. But that gives great comfort to the communities that we fly over. And then secondly, the regulation is great because it really does stop risk-taking businesses that have no, you know, don't have the right ethics to go faster and to compete by taking more risk, right? So you can't win in this industry by taking more risk and going faster than anyone else. That should be illegal, and it is illegal. So, you know, regulation isn't bad for us. The only reason regulation would be bad, and for example, in the United States, the regulation, you know, the FAA regulate the airspace in the USA, and they're a big organization. They don't move quickly, and so it's not that it's bad there, but the industry in the United States is moving more slowly than the rest of the world because the regulation isn't moving quickly enough. And so my suspicion is that Europe, my conviction is that Europe is at the lead of this. Where a number of countries in Europe, so Ireland is probably the world leader in terms of regulatory rules, governance, Switzerland, Poland, but collectively Europe is very well aligned and moving forward very quickly with regulations. But that's where regulations are a problem, and in some markets the regulations just aren't going fast enough to allow the industry, but they'll get there, and eventually Europe will show the world how this works and everyone else will follow.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Like how, so you did consider the impact of this on animals and birds, like how did you?
Yeah, we do. So I mean, we use the acoustic consultant firm to measure the sound, not just the sound level that we produce, but also the sound tone, so the quality of the sound that we produce. And so we understand very well what that sounds like in different environments. So when we fly over roofs of houses, when we deliver into a collection of houses in a narrow street, all that stuff. So we know the sound, the amplitude at different altitudes, different speeds, and also the tones. So it's the way to think about noise pollution is not about the noise level, the loudness of it. It's actually more about the type of noise that you produce. Amplitude is important, so dBA is very important, but just as important, if not more important, is the type of noise. So you'll see with a small drone, small propellers, certain high frequency, what are called broadband tones. So like a bee or a wasp, something like that. Those are considered, it's subjective but scientifically proven. Those are considered very bad noises for wildlife and for humans, right? They just don't like the sound of them, and also the sound travels through certain things like trees, bushes, right? We've got very large 30-inch props that spin at 50 hertz, and the result is that we don't produce any broadband tones, and broadband tones are the worst. So we know that the quality of the noise we produce is harmless to people. Number one is what we think about as people, not wildlife, but we also know, because we fly through wildlife all the time. We've done 46,000 flights and we've never touched a bird, and we fly all the time past and through flocks of birds and they don't care. And I've seen it personally where we test. We do test flights in a big farm in Ireland where it's huge amount of different types of wildlife, and we've observed. We have wildlife expert that we've hired monitoring. So we take it very seriously, because we think that in the end it would be the one area of concern for our industry at scale that we do have a negative effect on wildlife. So truthfully, the answer is we don't think there's a negative effect, but truthfully, we don't have the data that says we definitely don't have a negative effect. So it's about learning, collecting data, observing, respecting, and so one of the things, if I show you here again, let me just switch over. It's a good example. We actually bypass certain areas. So if I switch back to the town of Norramore, you'll see just around in here, is it here? Now I have the wrong place. I think there's an area here somewhere. Yeah, it's kind of here, right? This is a test flight. So around this area here, there's an old castle here, and just in here, just here for about a tiny little area, there's a little wildlife sanctuary there where certain birds are nesting that we never fly over. So you can do that if you know where not to fly over. But most places would be flying in very dense suburbs where really it'd be rare that there'd be what I would call very unique wildlife. And the final bit on that is bats. And I don't know what you know about bats, but bats are not disturbed by sound. They're disturbed by light. So bats don't like light, any type of light that's in their habitat, or a certain type of bats. And there's many species of bats and many species that are protected, so they're struggling to survive because of predators and bats. So our noise doesn't affect them, but we think about the lights. When we fly at night, you can see on the aircraft behind me, there's big lights on those arms, so they flash. They're aviation lights, right? So they flash, so that we're there, and you also know the direction we're flying in, because they flash in different colors. And there we know that there's a study to be done. There's no data yet that explains this to us, right? But the only thing we really change when we fly versus the road, because we make far less noise in a car on the road. Even in an electric car, we make far less noise than an electric car with the friction from the tires. But we produce light that wasn't there before in the air at 50 meters. So I don't call it a concern. It's something we need to understand and figure it out, right? We don't have to have the lights on, for example, but we have the lights on now for safety so that everyone knows where we are, but we don't need them. So if we find that the lights are causing a problem for wildlife, we'll just switch them off. But it's a good question, because it's probably the only remaining area we don't fully understand that does need to be solved before we scale it out.
So maybe it can be done like you keep the lights on the whole path. So maybe blinking every XYZ minutes, XYZ number of minutes. So this can be an option that can be considered, so that we know the direction and we know the indications and all. So this thing can be done. Also, I wanted to ask, did you think about doing the same thing in big cities with skyscrapers, because that height that you've selected for the drones to fly can be a problem in when there are tall buildings?
Yeah. So there's a number of reasons why very dense cities with tall buildings is not good for what we do. Firstly, the wind patterns around very tall buildings are horrible for small aircraft. So you can have winds that are going 70, 80 miles an hour up or down the sides of those buildings. And it's nearly impossible to know where those winds are predictably to avoid them. And it's absolutely impossible to fly in a downdraft, a strong downdraft, or even updraft, right? So it will never be safe to fly. Right, it will never be safe to fly a small aircraft beside a tall building. Now we could deliver to the roof of a tall building, and if it had the infrastructure, or access to the tall building, that would work. But that's not a good business, because if you have 200 homes in that tall building, they can't all go to the roof to get their stuff. And so it's difficult to see how in the short term or even the medium term that will be viable. And then two more reasons why we don't like tall buildings, because we choose 50 meters for a reason. And the reason is at about 30 meters and above, you can no longer really hear us. So at 50 meters, absolutely silent. You can't hear us over ambient wind. But it's very expensive in energy to climb that height. And we have to do it. We have to climb, fly, and then descend to deliver, and climb again and go back and descend. That descent and ascent phase of the flight, with 4 of those phases, are the most consuming of energy. So forward motion is easy. Ascending and descending, it's very slow and it uses a lot of energy. So every extra 10 meters reduces our range on the aircraft by quite a bit, like nearly a kilometer of range we lose for that extra 10 meters of altitude. So if you have a building that's 100 meters, you're going all the way up 100 meters and all the way back down. It's a really expensive thing to do for energy. So that's another reason. And the final reason is, generally in very dense suburbs that have those tall buildings, there's a lot of people living there. So there's 10, 20,000 people per square mile or even more. And that population density means that restaurants and suppliers have much more demand per distance. Per every kilometer, they have many more people. So they've more viability for their little shops and stores and restaurants and so on, which means there's many more of them. So the population density drives restaurant density. And when you have lots of restaurant density, it means that if you operate a human-based delivery system, it's very efficient. So one person in a suburb, one person can do about 1.8 deliveries per hour, right, per person. In an urban center like that, one person might do 3 to 5 deliveries per hour per person. So actually, to use people in those very dense areas is much better business than it would be in the suburbs. So it's not to say we wouldn't do a better job. It's that using people is viable in those very urban dense areas.
Yes, yes, I understand.
Any more questions? Quite a shy bunch of people. Yeah, so what I'd say, what I'd end up with, I think, is, you know, unless there's any more questions, what I'd end up with is it's pretty certain that over the next 3 to 5 years, drone delivery will become ubiquitous. It'll be everywhere in suburbs, not in big cities, and it will bring in a lot of good things, not a lot of bad things, but mostly good things, and mostly local businesses, small local businesses in small communities will be able to compete with Amazon with a better product. I mean, the local bookstore where we operate now, they have a better delivery product than Amazon have. They get to their customers more quickly and more efficiently than Amazon will ever be able to do. So we see actually drone delivery as a tool for communities to increase local commerce and compete with giant technology companies. So, and that's why we see the big benefit to society here, is we think it actually enables local commerce and enables small businesses to do a lot more business. And we think that's a great thing.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And what would you advise people to do if they have an idea which they want to execute, but they don't quite know how to go about it?
So you broke up, Savi. Can you say that again?
Sorry, what I mean is that what advice would you have for people who want to start something like this, but they don't really know how to go about it? They don't know what processes to follow or how to actually execute their dream.
Yeah, the number one thing is to get the right people, and it's the only thing really that's important. I mean, if you don't get the right people, you don't have a business, and really a business is just the people. I mean, an idea is easy. Raising money is easy. You know, all of the financial side of things, you know, the idea, all of that stuff is super easy. Anyone can come up with an idea. The difficult part and the thing that makes it successful or not successful is the team that you build and bring on with you. So there's no room for friends, you know, there's no room for any of that stuff. It's you find the best possible people that you can work with and that know how to do this, whatever it is that you want to do. And this is my 4th business that I've created. And the others were large businesses, you know, that I sold or that I traded in some way. And behind all of them, there's a lot of luck, definitely a huge amount of luck, honestly, timing, choosing the right time to do something. It's impossible to get that right. It's only luck, no matter how successful someone is or any of that stuff. Luck is a huge amount of it, because you can't look at an opportunity, an idea and say, now's the right time to do this. That's not the way it works. The stars have to line up. So you have to be very lucky to get your timing right to do a particular project. But then once when you get luck, ride it hard, as they say, like a winning horse, you know, if you're lucky with timing and the idea is right, the way you ride your luck hard is you get the best possible team to implement it, to execute the plan. And I am never stopping looking for good people. I'm always looking for people. And I've never in my life waited for a role to be open to fill the role. I've always been looking for people. And then when, you know, something comes up, I already know the person that can do that job or that would be perfect for that, you know, job. And that's key. And it's 90% of being a successful business is building the team, getting the team right, keeping them happy, not losing good people, all of that stuff. It's 90% of it. And for a CEO or anyone that's running a business, it should be a big chunk of your time is hanging out with great people, knowing them, getting them to know you, not looking to hire them, but just building a network of great people that one day when you need some great people, you already know them. They're there already. That's key.
So would you have any advice for people who are just graduating university or who are already in university? What would you advise them?
Well, if you're in university, that's the best place to find great people at the start of their careers, and find something passionate that you like to do. Work on some type of technology or some area, whatever you enjoy, and you'll find like-minded people in university. You join all the clubs, you get to know the people that way, and spend time and build projects together. I mean, not most, but a huge amount of startups come from little teams of people that know each other in universities, and then they start a business. But at the same time, frequently those teams are made up of friends and not necessarily the best people. And that's the difficult part, right? There's no room for friends. Maybe they're friends, okay, but that just means you get on with them. A business, a startup, and any business, it's a stressful environment. Friendships die in businesses. You have to make huge sacrifices. So it's not about whether you like the person, whether they like you, or whether you're good friends and you want to do something together. That's nice. It's a benefit, of course, to love people that you work with. But if they don't have the right attitude, they're willing to make the huge sacrifice that it takes to run a business, the 7 days a week, every hour you can get for years with low wages and risk. That's stressful, and very few people are able for that. So you don't make the mistake of picking your friends. You make the mistake of picking the best people that really, who's the best programmer you've ever met? That's the person, not the person that's nearly the best, that's your friend. You got the best person. And the same for everything, so that's a mistake I think a lot of people make. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it's fine. Sometimes you don't need the best programmer in the world, but why would you start with the second best when you can find the best?
There's another question by Likesh. Can you please unmute yourself? Or put the question in the chat.
No.
Is there
Right.
anyone else who wants to ask anything? I think that was a very interesting session, and we learned a lot in terms of execution. I think is so important, and drones are really interesting. I worked with a small drone myself for image recognition. It was really fun.
Yeah.
And it's so exciting to work with drones, but even scaling a project with drones seems like it seems almost unattainable because it's such a small. I mean, it's a lot of things which are involved with it, and it seems almost impossible. But obviously, things are growing, things are happening, and it is one step forward to the future, definitely.
For sure, and it's a very rewarding industry to learn in as well. So
Yeah.
I'd recommend it for anyone.
Thank you so
One
much.
more thing. One
Yeah.
more thing. Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
So COVID, gave us the opportunity to have, people love the idea of having drones, especially in this kind of time. But what after COVID?
And
Like
well, I
when
mean,
people will
it's
lose their
kind of
jobs.
it's kind of after COVID now. I mean, the world is trying to return to normal. And we're not a COVID business. We've had some kind of advantages during COVID because of lockdown. We were able to do our first project, but now we're operating normally and people are back to work, so we deliver to businesses and all that stuff. And then there'll be probably it's going to be a big economic impact, that will start to be evident over the next year or 2 years. And we don't know if COVID keeps rolling, come back or what. There's a lot of unknowns. But our success, or this industry's success, isn't tied to whether COVID is around or not around. It's kind of, even with an economic crash, a bad economic picture, we're still improving life for businesses, and anything that makes life better for businesses to get to customers efficiently and cheaply and to more customers, that's going to be good for those businesses, which in the end generates economic activity, which is good for everybody. So we stand to benefit from whatever outcome happens over the next few years. It's not going to be negative.
Yeah, now I believe that it's going to be ubiquitous.
Yeah.
That's amazing, Bobby. Thank you again for giving us your time. And we will put the recording on YouTube, so I will send you the link just after.
Very welcome. It was a pleasure to meet everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.